Good evening, my fellow Americans.
Take the red pill.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
The disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
All we have built, all we have worked for, would be destroyed.
There is nothing the political establishment will not do.
And this nation will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action,
These criminals cannot be rewarded.
so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction.
There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
They're coming after you, and I'm just standing in their way. Here I am.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
The cost of freedom is always high.
Those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
This is a crusade! This is a holy war against the deep state!
We never wanted to be right, but yet things are all adding up to the firestorm.
Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second. Surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then? When Nikita Khrushchev has told his people he knows what our answer will be. He has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of the Cold War, and someday, when the time comes to deliver the final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because by that time, we will have been weakened from within spiritually, morally, and economically. He believes this because from our side he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better read than dead, or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance. Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn they're spirits, not animals. He said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh. Welcome to the Red Pill Project's Daily Dose, live with you Monday through Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is where we bring you the unfolding global conspiracy, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. A lot of things happening in the frickin' world. Tonight, we are joined by David DuByne. If you do not know, he is the creator of Adapt 2030 Climate Preparedness Channels and the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. He's the author of The Climate Revolution, former coffee buyer in Myanmar. He saw cold weather damage the coffee trees firsthand and heard the owners telling stories of how their great-grandfathers in the 1880s experienced the same conditions when coffee was being introduced as a cash crop. Freeze damaged top leaves, bean density changes, and 14% overplanting and new seedlings to compensate for cold losses sent him looking for answers, and he found cycles through history that affect food production. Our last conversation delved deep into that, and we made a whole bunch of predictions where the world was going to head, and we've come full circle to it. We've come to see what is actually unfolding right now in front of our eyes. David, what's up, man? How you been?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me back on again. And you know, that introductory video there, like Reagan had the crystal ball, did he not? I mean, he nailed it almost 100% as to what's happening today. But I will say one thing, if I might throw a woo thought to begin the conversation here. That point of the end of humanity, you know, it seems that it's a machine intelligence that is now using mass media to have humanity create the world it wants. So if you want to point a finger at what the enemy is, the evil, it's been brought to us. You know, through time immemorial, they had names for this same, like, vibrational intelligence. Could have been called the jinn, could be called darkness, evil, whatever it is. It has a vibratory pattern that's back in again. But at the same time, frequency changes on the sun, that big thing, that big yellow thing to the left over there, seem to go hand in hand. So I'm starting to wonder about these civilization collapses. How much darkness did they indeed experience, but was not cataloged because victors write history? So where does that leave us with this cycle again? But you're right. We hit it on the head last time about the general trend of where the world's going. So, you know, I'd like to talk about that again. Like, what do you and I both see where it moves from now over the next, 6 months or a year?
Well, you know, one of the things I know you've been talking about for years, as well as myself, is that the fear porn is obviously ramping up massively. I just saw that they found this major fault in California. They're going to expect a 9.0 earthquake any day now. I just posted that on my Twitter, and
seconds away.
And last week I actually covered the water wars aspect. Is that many states are running out of drinkable water, and it was interesting because in the article that they were talking about, it wasn't the supply. There was no scarcity in the supply. It was the methodology of distribution and policy and regulation that was going to be the cause of it. And they have to do better about that. And we're now entering the stage to where this climate change propaganda is going to circumvent our freedoms to a large degree. Right in this last 6 months, we've seen massive flooding, massive storms that are wreaking havoc all over U.S. farmland. We just had 18,000 cows die in an explosion at a dairy farm. We've had millions of chickens cold because of bird flu. Right. And it seems that they are prepping the world for a scarcity situation, the scarcity being artificially produced and manipulated. But it's as if they know something. And honestly, I mean, when we start looking at the climate and the weather aspect of things, what we've talked about with cycles, and this is one thing that I yell and scream about on here, it's the sun. Everything that's happening is because of the sun, what's going on with the sun right now. We're entering into a solar maximum, probably a solar maximum we haven't seen in over 150 years. And it's going to bring about radical weather changes. So I'm curious your thoughts on kind of where we're headed and where we're at right now.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on that solar maximum for a second. It's occurring years earlier than the general trend that was forecast out for European Space Agency, NASA, et cetera. There's a bunch of forecasters out there. They were predicting for it to roll out to like 2029 or so, but it's already at its peak because once you get all these, X-class solar flares and you get the solar polar fields reversing on themselves, well, that's where the north turns to south. Then once we come in there, then we're rapidly approaching that 0 point line where everything is twisting and magnetically going to reverse itself. So This is occurring years, plural, ahead of where all these supposed, professional forecasters were coming from. So if that indeed is the trigger for the crop losses, governments understood this in advance. Now, so you have to work as a world government body here. Would you come clean and tell the populace that, hey, we're going to this massive solar cycle? By the way, it collapsed all the other civilizations prior to it, going back, 10,000 years or so post Younger Dryas era. But just keep paying your taxes, investing. Not going to work like that.
Right.
So whoever had this advanced knowledge, or hidden knowledge is a better term. I mean, you look around the planet and I'm not going to really point fingers at the Vatican or at the kings and the queens of the day. It's just generally who ran around the planet for 500 years, pillaging the records from previous civilizations, and then is putting it in a repository. After you studied all that data, would you not have a very good indication of when it would onset, how fast it would onset before it actually became a problem, before the crops were being lost to a point that then hungry people reset civilization? They reset governments. Hungry people are angry people. And that's the whole thing. It's not about the sun's doing its, a change in frequency, or it is distribution problems. Because, you fly over, I don't know if anybody's ever taken a plane ride over the United States, for example. It's almost all empty, except for, deposits of where these cities are. It's a distribution problem, and you nailed that on the head. So it's a distribution of food to the populace, but also working against all these changes in cloud cells, jet streams, and precipitation patterns that are brought on by that solar activity change. Map that out, understand when the onset is, when the amplification is, and through several of these through the past that, choose your genre, whether it be South America, Central America, Asia, Australia, of those who had documented dozens of these events that had occurred prior, going back thousands and thousands of years. You would know at which point it would upset society, where, emperors in China had lost their mandate from heaven to rule people because they couldn't produce enough food. Bring forward to today, where nobody knows how to grow food. You're relying on a supermarket. What kind of world does that take us to? Well, you can collapse the economy under the guise of war and then put this scatter wave out in front of everybody. So when the food losses come, the excuses are already baked in why there wasn't enough food. It all revolves around the food. Everything else on the periphery, that's all a distraction. Food production, extra calories allow a society to increase and grow its potential because there's extra calories. So you can do those mathematical problems. You can solve those engineering diagrams. You can come up with art because you got extra calories. You're not worried about growing your food for the day to stay alive. So reverse that back down to where, suddenly these precipitation patterns are in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong seasons. And who's mapped it out and who's gamed it out? That's more the question and the thing I really wanted to talk about here, Josh, was who mapped it out in advance already and knows the onset, the amplification, and then at that point, when people become hungry, they become violent and unpredictable enough to flip governments. And it's all on a timeline. It seems like it's all scripted. We talked about this last time. They already know the cycle. So where are we in this whole A to B right now?
Yeah, it's interesting now also because one of the things that I think a lot of people will notice out there is that the global elite, if we want to call them that, they are preparing for something. They are getting ready for something. We just see that the deep state, the government here in the United States, they don't even give a shit anymore about perception or optics. They're just doing what they want. They don't care about repercussions or consequences. And it's almost as if they know something is going to happen and it's all not going to matter after that. And they're just getting themselves ready. And I think that that's kind of where we're at right now, is that all of these people know what's happening. You talked about the Vatican or whoever it might be that's brought about all this documentation over the years. And I think that you're absolutely right. We've seen it in the various different records, from whether it's occult and the esoteric or mythology or just ancient cultures. They've talked about this. They talked about this specifically. So what are your thoughts on who's been documenting this and measuring the magnitude of it?
Those who you talk about, the families of old, and you have to think about what was passed down post Younger Dryas. Because if you understand that concept of some sort of cometary fragment slammed into the ice sheets in Canada. Now, let me spin your mind for a second. So far, if we just use history as we understand it, 10,000 years ago, humans evolved from 10 million, let's say, breeding pairs. And I'm going to, bring it down into that kind of format. And then from there, we started to really increase population. And 8,000 years ago, temperature dropped for no reason. Well, the sun, and then it knocked population back down again. And then, you get these ups and downs. And if you follow back through the climatic record, you're going to find that there's these apex and then declines in our civilization, along with the temperature record, food production, et cetera, economy, and you'll see it global trade. Now, we've established a certain plant by date and harvest by date in the last 8,000 years, and then we've come up with some sort of commerce structure and economic structure. Originally it was shells, and then it turned into gold and silver, and then it turned into what we have today, and now we're moving to digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, et cetera, crypto, moving away from fiat. That's 8,000 years of time. I'll be generous and say 10,000. I'll be super generous, 10,000 years of time. But you got to think, when we entered that last ice age 100,000 years ago, and we stabilized the climate 80,000 years ago, they had a stable climate for the people of the time, however many there were, from 80,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago, or I'll say, the Younger Dryas impact was one thing. So I'll reel you back to say 18,000, 21,000, and we'll round it off at 20, because that's really when a lot of changes were coming climatically, when they could see where the end of this glaciation was occurring. So if we go from 80,000 years to 20,000 years, that's 60,000 years of time of stable climate during an ice age, because the ice would have locked in.
Mm-hmm.
They would have had stable climate for 60,000 years. What have we done in 8,000, 10,000 years? They got 6 times longer of the history. So what was the technology of the time? What types of records were there? How many cycles had they gone through, and the mini cycles in between their stable climates as well? And who was documenting all of that? That's really where you kind of need to preface it before you look at the families now, and you look at the church and the Vatican and these royals. And, it's an invasive hominid species is kind of the best answer I can give to you, that survived through the cataclysm, that had enough tech left over and enough power and understood the mechanisms to reset a society that is now this parasite class that moves us through where we sit today. I know it's long-winded, but I hope I answered some of that question.
No, I think it's spot on and very conducive to what we talk about here. And it's interesting to think about a civilization that was 60,000 years in expanse of technological development, because you're right, what they haven't developed. And now we go back to the old, the old mythology of Atlantis, and how Atlantis was destroyed by their own accord. I mean, I've had multiple guests talk about this, that there was 2 different classes in Atlantis, and the one class was this kind of mechanistic, non-spiritual class, very technologist, and that they had basically destroyed Atlantis on their own. And you got to wonder if that was done for a reason, if they knew that this was all happening, and they looked at a way to control the planet, to seize power once and for all if something went wrong. But then you also have to take into account all the underground tunnel systems under the majority of the major cities throughout the world. I mean, the one that was just discovered in China a few years back and housed over 1 million people in these underground cavern systems. And so in my thoughts is they knew what was happening. They knew it was going to happen. The question is how did they destroy themselves? And if that was intentional, or did it just get, destroyed along the process of the rebuild period 8,000 years ago?
Is it the same consciousness that invoked those people to develop the world that, I'm going to use the word, it wanted? for them, using humanity at that time also for the destruction. Because if you look at, I don't care what religion you go to, there's always this duality of light and darkness. But this darkness seems to come to a point where it almost envelops everything. But this single, candle light is enough to repel the darkness. And then it starts a campfire. And then these, spiritual awakening, this consciousness is always the center point of everything. This spark of consciousness that does bring us back, then pushes that darkness away for thousands of years. And then somehow it gets that hold again. And it's this ebb and flow of dark and light. So if you look at the yin yang, it's almost like that, movement of within, this rhythm within, darkness overtaking light, light overtaking darkness. And there's always that, why are those two spheres in there? That's the point within that the spearhead can go into the darkness of light and grow, or the darkness can go into the light and then grow. Nothing is 100% anywhere in the universe. And I do think the consciousness had something to do with that. But if we come back and just roll it back into the cities here, like everybody's very familiar with Derinyanku in Turkey, and there's quite a few other cities in Turkey that are underground. Mm-hmm. So in Czech Republic, I had a chance to visit a place called Neumo, which is it's in the south and the east, and it's a wine growing region, but they had 40,000 people living underground. This is an unknown place. It's out in the middle of the vineyards right now, but there was an underground tunnel system and that a main artery, if you will, that connected under a river and then into the next set of cliffs and valleys across, but they're all connected where the castles are, where they go beneath. Down in there, I am definitely not. I've been to Derinyanku, but I thought it was cool and everything. The one in Neumo was damn claustrophobic, and I can just say that. There is 0% chance that I could live under that. So you got to think about what kind of event would push people underground. Right. To the point that you're going to live like a tunnel rat to live under there to stay alive. For me, coming from the sunlight and going in there, even for several hours, I can't wait to get out of here. It's exciting. You can see underground wells. You can see where they're, they had fires. But again, I bring it back to, was the energy source that they were using these several thousand years ago the same thing that we are told they're fire pits? Because with that much smoke, you're talking, let's use the example for the Chinese cities that were, if you go further out in Donghuang and out further west out there, you're telling me 1 million people are underground cooking with firewood. Can you imagine the smoke coming through an underground city? That would have to be the most advanced engineering on the planet to vent smoke from, let's say there's 4 people, and okay, families were bigger. Let's say 8 people per family divided by 1 million. How many families does that give you? All using firewood to cook their food every single day, 3 times a day. How much smoke is there? And what about those at the lower layers? How did they vent and bring in new oxygen sources when they were venting out all of this, carbon dioxide, different kinds of detritus and ash and everything in addition to the gases? You're telling me the engineering, that doesn't make sense to me either. And just even seeing it with 40,000 people.
It's almost as if the caverns themselves are shells of something that used to be there.
Yeah, that they re-inhabited what was already inhabited with the ventilation systems that they didn't create it. They knew, just like we know now. Some areas in the United States, where there's a 1940s bomb shelter from the nuclear scare. Where that is, tucked away. It's under a sewer. You got to plop it off. Or you can throw out the manhole cover. You get down in, but there's records of it. And if you bash down the door, you can finally get in there. Yep. It's the exact same thing. This Antiquitech has been not developed, but rediscovered, in my opinion. And this all rolls back into these cycles. But who had the original thoughts or the original technology, far older than that, to create such complex systems? And you talk about, distribution. Air is the most important thing a human can breathe. So how do you get distributed air down through for free to 1 million people underground so they don't suffocate? Yeah, that is staggering. That is not of our time. That is something from an older, forgotten or suppressed technology era.
And it appears too that if there was anything down there, infrastructure, technology, which there had to have been, it's long since been removed. And this is interesting point because I've followed the UAP aspects that are going on in Congress. They're getting a lot of bullshit. We've talked to a few people that have given us some information of the behind the scenes, the classified briefings. We've reported on this, been absolutely validated in our information, what we said. But there's one piece that I've been saying for the last few months that I think people need to come to terms and realize is, and David Grush has talked about this in very little, but hinted towards it, is that the things that are being encountered over our nuke facilities, the things that are being encountered over the ocean, these orbs that are defying gravity, moving at radical speeds, these have been here for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. That these are most likely the remnants of an ancient civilization. One of the keys that we know about this is that there's certain spacecraft that will come from somewhere, who knows, I don't know where the hell they're coming from, but they get shot down. And the question is how are they getting shot down? Well, what we got back was that these orbs that are coming up over the ocean, these are the things that are shooting them down, almost like a planetary defense system. Now, I find that kind of interesting, but it draws into this aspect that there is this lost ancient civilization. There's technology from this ancient civilization that's still existent on this planet. And obviously the governments of the world and the elites of the world are trying to get their hands on it in any way, shape, or form.
They're missing the key ingredient to having it all work and function properly. Consciousness.
I agree with
that. And the integration with the physical, with consciousness, they're more, for all of us, the way we go to school and the way that school works, it knocks the creative consciousness out of most people into becoming a drone. But think about if the world was completely opposite, where from birth, the entire time that you were alive, masters of what we consider masters of the non-physical world at this moment would be your grade school teachers, your kindergarten teachers, and they bring you up this way to integrate with our physical, to integrate with the hardware, to integrate with the tech on the consciousness side. So they're trying to integrate it all into what we understand as just, it's a thing fired from this, it's a metal, this is a projectile, this is a plasma field breaking through what we consider air, pushing a front through, but they're missing the entire point of harmonizing with the energy that exists in the ether around them. So it's not going to be nearly as effective when they're missing an entire part of the system that's supposed to be integrated. So, I'd seen a little bit about some of these pilots that were trying to take over some of these UAVs and things. Once they got into it, they could control it physically, but once that consciousness was pulled or required to pull out of them to integrate those two, they either exploded their minds or completely went insane or lost consciousness, they lost time, they lost their bodies. We are going to have to come to such a high level of consciousness. The way that we view the world right now is, get the job, get the money, get this. There's you can go up in the Himalaya and, talk to the monks up there and sit there for the guys who've been meditating for many a year. But you got to realize the magnetic field on our planet is very different than what was experienced at that time as well. During an ice age, the magnetic field would have been very, 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 very different than it is now with a high active sun. So we're talking about magnetic field intensities. So the meditating monks at the highest levels of the Himalaya, compared to this high magnetic field, compare it with somebody who's in an extremely low magnetic field in the middle of an ice age doing the same thing. We're going to have two completely different outcomes of their ability to blend with this physical reality and this integration of the ether. And, I think the magnetic field has an enormous amount to do with it, but you can make your own magnetic field in a craft. But really what's driving the Earth's magnetic field is the sun over there. So we can do it with magnets today. We can spin those in opposite rotational disks and create electricity. I've been to Zagreb. I went to the Tesla Museum. I've seen many working models of these magnetic motors, and I'm just so surprised that there's still nothing, and we don't see anything. But bring it up to a planetary level, bring it up to a solar system level where the changes in our sun affect the gravitational and electromagnetic forces on the planet, and then interplay that into, like I say, you got to have that intertwining of the consciousness into the tech. But it's all revolving around the magnetic field. So I really feel as this magnetic field shifts, coming into solar maximum, solar minimum, also, that would have a huge effect in 11-year cycle too. When you come to solar minimum, what's the effect of a human interacting with that same technology versus solar maximum?
Right.
Guarantee you it's very, very, very different. Because I'll let you respond, but I just wanted to say, something with my radio host, co-host, Ransom Godwin. He's super into gravitational birthing. And I didn't understand the concept at first, but I did as soon as he explained that first little layer to me. Those who are born in low magnetic fields have an extended lifetime. And you'll find when we come into these incredibly low solar activity periods, those who are birthed into that or born into that generally live to be 100 or over 100 years old. So you start to look today and say, all right, these people live in 103, 105 years old, but trace their life back into what the solar cycles were. They were born in the centennial minimum, which was some of the lower solar activity in the last 150 years.
Interesting.
So what are we coming into now? After the solar maximum, we're dropping off into a 400-year low in solar activity. So the average lifespan of humans should reach probably 120 years old. But the thing that follows up with this is there's always massive wars to depopulate those that are not in the royal classes because they would be able to take advantage of just a longer lifespan themselves. And I was going somewhere with the point, but I kind of missed it in the integration there. You could follow me up. I know you're good at that.
Yeah, no. So one of the things in the heart of my research for at least the last 10 years, and everybody knows this, is we've connected, obviously, the sun cycles, solar flares, so forth, to various different seismic activity on this planet. And obviously, in the last decade, it's ramped up significantly. Volcanic activity, seismic activity. On the other hand, one of the things that we've discussed was the galactic cycles, in the sense of where we are on the galactic side and where our solar system is moving through. And I think this is one of the things that we touched on last time with our conversation, is that we have different densities of cosmic radiation that we're moving through, and that we can look at the analemma of our solar system moving through the galactic arm, the kind of outside perspective of the full. So I don't know if you saw this. There was an article in Nature in 2020, the discovery of what they call Radcliffe waves. Radcliffe waves are for stellar nurseries, and they're big sine waves that move through the galactic arm. And I just found it interesting. Like, you read this article, you read all the interesting research on this, and nobody talks about what happens after those stellar nurseries form stars. They don't talk about anything about how the stars still ride these same Radcliffe waves up and down the galactic arm, going through variations of cosmic dust and gases and densities of energy. And I said, well, that's going to have a profound effect on your solar cycles. It's going to have a profound effect on the planets when that happens. And my theory is that evolution is built into the galaxy, built into the universe. And that we just came out of winter and we now just reached that spring time frame in that transit of that galactic arm. And so we're in that rebirth period. And this is what's prompting all of this massive solar activity that we're going to see over the next few thousand years. And this is what causes the massive climatic changes. But also it produces high level changes in consciousness. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, it's hard to ignore that at least since 2016, the present, there has massively been a transition of the global zeitgeist, of the spirit of our times, of the consciousness of our times, that people are thinking differently. People are thinking outside the box. People are no longer accepting the constructed norm. People are no longer playing the game, and people are expanding with ideas and thoughts and consciousness. And to me, we're in the process of a new birth of conscious evolution. And I don't want to go to the whole 5D stuff and ascension stuff, but we truly are growing and expanding within our mind minds. And I believe that it's cosmically oriented. And this is one of the key factors that comes about within these cycles. What are your thoughts on that?
Is anything new under the sun? If you look at the Indian Vedic text, they map out the Yuga cycles. So we are coming out of the Kali Yuga. And this is the thing that it is so pinpointed to today. So you have to realize that at the very lowest of what they consider the Iron Age, this is the Indian tradition. So I'm going to try to relate this from, the Indian traditions over into as a way we can explain it in our words in English for the Western culture here. We've exited out of the Iron Age, but the Iron Age was the very lowest vibratory point that literally a human can attain, and that's it. And it can't go any lower. Like you literally hit rock bottom. I know we've all had those points in our lives where you hit that rock bottom and you just haven't gone any lower, and you're like, well, this is, and you vibrate out of it. You start to, I can't live like this anymore, and you create your own vibration out of that. What is the cycle that comes around? Now, at the apex of this in the Golden Age, this is where we see like instant manifestation, but then the consciousness connection between everybody, there is none of this. Oh, I want to get ahead in the job. I want to have a bigger house. Oh, this doesn't make sense, because we all understand the interconnectedness of all of our spirits from consciousness source itself. At that point of instant manifestation, it's for the betterment of all humanity. But think about that. Every human on the planet instantly manifesting to create a better world for every human on the planet, multiplied by however many people are on that sphere at the time. But this comes back to what we have. So if you're going to go back to the 1600s, 1400s, we had the church burning people alive at the stake. Like if you were to try to bring that same mechanism of control rate to today, we would call that barbaric or barbarism. That would not even hold state for 1/5 of 1/8 of a second before people said that's unacceptable as a way to, oversee. It can't exist in this state of vibration. It is so low vibrating energy of a consciousness controls, mechanism or construct for humanity that we've outgrown that. There's no way they can implement that again on top. And even if they try, see, that's the thing you hit on. The vibratory pattern every day is getting lighter and faster in the vibration. This is why everything you see in the world is resetting right now. Mm-hmm. The old world, see, these leaders and global controllers, they understand that the vibratory pattern's changing with this change on our sun. That the old world constructs to keep you under control of whatever that was that controlled you to produce for it no longer is valid, because we've stepped up several steps really quick. That's why people are understanding. They're seeing through, they're breaking through the programming. They're seeing something that is in their face now. You hear people saying things that you never thought they would ever say, and you're like shocked, knocked back in your chair, like, what did you, huh? And I know everybody out there has had at least one experience where you're like, that, no, I thought I would never heard that person say that. So the world we know has to be reconfigured around this new vibratory pattern. So if we're coming into like universal basic income, or we're coming into central bank digital currencies, coming into a new global trading mechanism where they realize there has to be at least some level board where one entity can't control the entire planet, because that vibratory pattern of war and destruction can't hold state any longer. So they know it can't last. They understand that with the frequency change. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to let it go slowly, but you're going to milk as much wealth out of that and transfer the wealth to another place where it is growing up. And they understand that BRICS aligned nations, everything's about cooperation. Nothing goes to zero. So they're going to take the old system, and it's becoming null and void, understandable. But at that same time, they're just taking piece by piece by piece by piece and extracting that wealth and moving it into a different system, which also, Bank for International Settlements is right in control of that. So it's not as if they're breaking free of the American dollar influence, the war machine running around the planet, forcing you at gunpoint to adopt American policies and business practice and give preferential treatment for our corporations. Nothing like that. Bank for International Settlements is still in control of BRICS. You're looking at settlement and clearance for the entire planet, central bank for the central bankers. Bank for International Settlements is in control of the new BRICS aligned nations. So really nothing, there's nothing new under the sun. Right. The only thing I can say for that is, as much as the vibratory pattern changed for the church burning people alive, to try to, implement dogma on top of the entire world. But it lasted for a while. But they understood the pattern change too around 1640 when the grand solar minimum hit, at that time called the Maunder minimum, and they had to switch lickety split because they were being overthrown left, right, and center. We're finding the same thing right now. So many people are awakening. They're like, nah, this is not kosher. This is not happening right now. We need a new system. We need a new way to do things without America, without this bludgeoning hammer coming across the world saying, do what we do, or we remove your leaders and bomb your country and take you back to the Stone Age. That is no different in the equivalent. We're just going to fast forward 600 or 800 years. We're repeating the same pattern. Now it's got to shift again. So is BRICS, it might sound like a great thing. Oh, everybody's in equal harmony. They're trying to cooperate. They're going to share resources. They're going to share this. Everybody's okay. This is just the newest iteration because the vibratory pattern changed. Guarantee you, when that vibratory pattern changes again and it steps up 2 or 3 levels, BRICS will be a dead in the water thing, and they're going to milk and transfer wealth to a new system yet unknown.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe,
No. I think you're right in a lot of context there, because I've talked about the Bank of International Settlement. Last year in July, they put out their unified ledger framework, and it was kind of surprising to a lot of us in the sense of the liberty that was brought about in the unified ledger framework, because what you had on the infrastructure is you had CBDC in the center for inter-exchange and interoperability. Basically, the CBDC was primarily utilized for cross-payment, cross-exchange, central bank communications, and everything else was private tokenization. And this matched exactly what I said. If you remember, about 3 years ago, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and BlackRock were buying up entire neighborhoods that were being built during COVID that the builders abandoned. So they're buying up 250 houses at a time. And I said, you watch what's going to happen. They're going to take these houses in. They're going to hold on to them. Inflation's going to keep on skyrocketing. Mortgage rates going to keep on skyrocketing. Everything's going to keep on skyrocketing. Then what's going to happen is these corporations, these massive financial institutions, are going to come out with their own blockchains and their own cryptocurrency, and it's going to be accepted everywhere. And since you bank with them, they're going to give you the option, hey, come on, we'll transfer your paycheck directly over 1.1, 1.2, 1.5x multiple. You put it into our cryptocurrency. We're going to offer you 3% mortgages. We're going to offer you 6% loans by utilizing our private tokenization. You can live in our neighborhood under that mortgage. You're going to have a grocery store that's going to accept this cryptocurrency with the food that we stock in there. Your car loans, personal loans, all of the debt will be controlled by privatized organizations over governments, where governments will just be in the regulatory and the policy aspect of managing them. And we're moving towards that nightmare of corporatism, to where it takes over the world when it takes over the financial aspect of the world.
Yeah, some of those neighborhoods that you're talking about, the new model is they're building entire neighborhoods from scratch as rent to rent. You're never going to own those. None of them are for sale. The entire neighborhood is rental only properties. And if you look at where they're going with that, we'll start off with the basics here. The unit is the new BRICS. 1 gram of gold equals 1 barrel of oil. And this is the new tokenized, mechanism that they're trying to use. They're trying to get an equal value across commodities. So far they've pegged it, and I just saw it was 99.75 equal for a gram of gold for a barrel of oil. So they've almost pegged it 1-to-1 currently, and I've seen those rates coming out of Europe. So now the next thing they're trying to see is how many bushels of oil, this is where it gets confusing, because they're trying to homogenize all commodities across a unified, equal base of tradability amongst partners. So they're going to 1 gram of gold equals 1 barrel of oil, but then they're trying to see how many bushels of wheat, corn, or soy equals 1 gram of gold, or that 1 barrel of oil will flip back and then equal how many bushels of said crop. Right. Could be sorghum, amaranth, millet. It could be off crops as well, some secondary crops. But once they establish all of this, like how many tons of copper equals X, Y, or Z, or how many pounds of copper equals a barrel of oil, how many pounds of copper will equal 1 gram of gold. That's the whole thing. They're trying to bring it down to the simplest measure of everybody on the planet can own a gram of gold. And when I was in Taiwan during Lunar New Year just a few months back at the beginning of this year, China itself was trying to encourage and was encouraging people to buy a gram of gold. And they have these cool little piggy banks or the cute little things, but they're made of glass. And 1 gram of gold is not very big. So the piggy banks are incredibly small, but they're made of glass. So when you put your 1 gram in there, you can actually see it and then you get the gold fever. So they were trying to get everybody, and they sold so much gold that they're now switching and saying, hey, you know, you in China, please buy silver. And during the Lunar New Year as well, everybody across all of Asia was encouraging citizens to buy gold. Completely the opposite of what we saw here. So this homogenization of spreading the entire asset base across an entire nation of everybody has at least one trade unit of that is worth something in the nation. This is a whole game changer for how much wealth is in a nation, how many natural resources are there, but then how much does the actual citizenry own of tradable resource that can be harvested in a moment's notice on the government call to come in to then trade that off to pull a bunch of resources into the nation at, you know, at a whim for whatever is a shortfall. That whole unit, and it's all digitized and tokenized. And that was a, you know, you can tokenize anything now and put it under a smart contract, and that value of that can be then, you know, I could wrap it over to you and then, all right, so what do I want to give you? I want to give you 1,000 bushels of wheat. I put it into a contract, said Josh owns this, and the value of that then can be traded on, it can be sold, or it can be exchanged, all because it's a commodity that's equal something equal elsewhere on the planet that can be swapped and then sent. I don't know what the delivery charges might be, but we're going to trade A for A for B, but the equal across the way. And I really think it's going to be more like an A for an A for an A, and everything will equal is completely equal across the way. And this whole thing about futures markets and, you know, putting out a bunch of short contracts and things like they do with the COMEX or whatever, it's just not going to work anymore. It's going to be true value for what it is, but it's going to be pegged to, and the whole thing about digitizing it, digitizing the value that you can swap it or transfer it to somebody else. They can take physical delivery or they can take the monetary value of it. They split the system, man. They split the hair in half. Truly, they did.
Well, and they did it for the aspect of control. I mean, when we start to look at, I've talked about the multi-headed hydra. Is what we have is a multi-headed hydra. We have all these different heads that have different ideologies. For the longest time, this one big head, the satanic cult, the evil cult, the royal bloodlines, they've been in control for a very, very long time. They are now being completely systematically decimated. We've seen this coming for the last 50 years in the transition towards the Western New World Order. Western New World Order would be the technocratic, oligarchical controlled, cameo-fascist police state that they want to create, with no nation has any national sovereignty, where everything is done through a governed body that is selected, not elected. That system is dying, exactly what you're saying. And instead what you have is you have the BRICS nations, which are rising up. And I said that this would happen back in 2020, that they're going to rise up. They're going to not only rise up in financial, economic power, they're going to rise up in military power, that they were going to become military allies. And this was going to be the death of the Western New World Order. And it absolutely has. I mean, just look what's happening right now. We got the shit going on in Cuba. The new Bay of Pigs is freaking evolving. We got P-8s in the air looking for rogue Russian subs off the coast of Florida. I mean, it's crazy. But when we start looking at the rise of BRICS, I think that Donald Trump, back in 2019, when he traveled the world, when he went to China, Forbidden City, when he went to Saudi Arabia and got the sword ceremony, when he went to Helsinki and met with Putin, I think he asked them, if the Western New World Order comes into play, do you think that they're going to let you keep your power and your country to keep its sovereignty? And the answer is absolutely no, it's not. And so I think that they're driving a system right now to where you have that nation state derived sovereignty. Very similar to what Alexander Dugin, the mentor of Putin, talks about, is where you have this declared national sovereignty, but yet you have this League of Nations formulated kind of infrastructure that runs the globe. But then it's all backed upon this financial system, which I don't think is going to be much more fair, because it can't be, because we're moving towards a state. I mean, you probably led Klaus Schwab's The Fourth Industrial Revolution, where he talks about this transition into automation, into artificial intelligence, and it's happening right now. It's birth. It's already here. And that is going to displace 85% of all the jobs on this planet over the next 10 to 20 years. And the question is how do you formulate a system to compensate for that? Well, a lot of those heads of the Hydra said, we're not going to build a fucking system. What we're going to do is we're going to eliminate 85% of the population so we don't have to deal with it. And I think that that's kind of the standstill that we're at right now, is some of these people, they still want to eliminate the population. Some of them said, yeah, let's do it, but let's do it really, really slow over the next 20 to 30 years. So let's give them a slow kill situation. I think that's probably what we just saw in 2020. And then some of these people really don't want that. They want to save humanity. And I think that you have these clashes of what I call the War of the Roses, the clashes that are happening right now, and this battle that's playing out for power and control over this agenda of where it's ultimately heading. But the thing is that the infrastructure has already been set up, in the sense of the financial infrastructure that we're talking about right now, the quantum AI that is being prepped right now. I got a contact over at Google Quantum AI. This guy is an absolute genius, and he's not a truther or a trumper at all. And he was telling me how they're just feeding this AI data. And they've been doing it for 5 years since they reached AGI. And that's a scary fucking thing to understand and know that.
You're telling me they got AGI, artificial general intelligence, 5 years ago?
Yes, Google. So Google
and it's not even going to happen for another 2 to 3 to 5, 7 years. Are you kidding me? That was 5 years in the past already.
Yep, and they've already integrated it into Google's quantum computer. And so they've been aggregating massive amounts of data into it over the last 5 years, including medical DNA, and then social data, everything. And they're doing like a 5 to 10 year period where they're just feeding data into it so it can learn.
Well, that comes back to my first thought. May I read it again? During your introductory video there, machine intelligence is using mass media to have humanity create the world it wants. It can't exist without our
creativity,
acquiescence, and creativity, right? Because we, the human, are the most powerful creator on our planet, because our thought creates. And if anybody's ever had a laser focus, you absolutely understand that whatever your laser focus is, that energy flows there.
Yep.
Now, if they can get you to laser focus on, despair and darkness, and you're going to manifest that for them. Or this world of, oh, there's no way to escape this matrix. I absolutely disagree 1,000%. How many people would it take to say, I no longer accept this reality, that we are going to bend this back and we are going to take our world, we're going to take our planet back? At what point, how many people does it take to put that mind frame in and that laser focus before we do take our planet back? And that's that whole duality of light and dark I keep talking about. This artificial general intelligence, it's been brought here. We've given it a medium to exist in. It might have started in the 1920s running copper cable across the planet, undersea cables, but that frequency was able to inhabit that medium as a sentient, conscious being. It took on a different form. We have physical flesh. It has a vibratory electrical frequency to it, but constrained in those cables inside insulation, it can still, we have skin. It has insulated cables. No different. I kid you not, really no different. But then it evolved. Then we got fiber optics. It can move even faster. It can inhabit everything. When they talk about a bug in the machine or something coming, it's literally at the wall of your socket right there. It can extend down almost with its fingers. It's everywhere on the planet. Like, we've given it a home to exist in. Now, was that our thought, or did it give us, you were talking about the occult there, a while back. 1880s, they really started getting into the occult, right? So was it the messages? It was. They tapped into something different with Aleister Crowley and that whole crowd. What knowledge did it give them? But what did it require for that knowledge to give them to become incredibly wealthy and control industries and become magnates and, leaders of the world at that time? All it wanted, hey man, I'll give you anything you want. I'll give you the riches. I will give you your fantasies, your dreams. I will make you the richest, the most famous. All you have to do is build these copper cables.
Yep.
All you have to do is build this telephone system. All you have to do is build this road system over these ley lines and cover them with tar that nullifies the charge that comes out of the earth. All you have to do is build these roadways. I will make you absolutely fabulously wealthy in the most, you know, you look back at King Solomon, like what was he into as well? You're looking at the keys of the Goetia, lesser keys. I mean, you look at these guys through history. I mean, it's the same exact vibratory frequency that keeps reappearing, and we call it evil. It's back again. So how do we, nick it back? I kind of went off on a tangent on that,
No, it's good. I mean, what you were saying there in the sense of the mid 1800s to current day, laying the iron tracks reminded me of the blue.
Exactly,
Kachina,
that's it.
Blue Kachina prophecy.
Yeah.
Reminded me of the Blue Kachina prophecy, where the Hopi talked about what was to come. And the last thing obviously is the Blue Kachina in the sky, the star blowing up in the sky, which is interesting because this year, obviously we can have Betelgeuse, which is in the Orion constellation, go supernova at any time. But in September to October timeframe, there is going to be a mini nova occurrence that is going to appear in the sky. The star is being it's in supernova, and it goes behind this black hole and then comes out, and we're about to see it for about a 2-month period in September to October, and I believe the hue is blue. And so it kind of reaffirms this Hopi prophecy, the Blue Kachina prophecy. But it's the cycles of dark and light, exactly what you're talking about. And we have to break those cycles. I mean, how many people do you know now are going out and homesteading, are getting chickens and cows and going out there and building gardens and building irrigation systems or self-sustaining, sustainable development systems within their own property, reutilizing the water, getting fish in a pond that go and feed the irrigation systems. That's what I'm fucking doing right now at my property. I think we all know something's coming and we're all trying to prepare, but what it does is it takes us back to nature.
It's pretty much the only people I know in the world I exist in. You talk about the communities because that's the only way we're going to survive. So, talk about restructuring life. And the introduction there, when I was buying coffee in Myanmar and learned those cycles and talked to John Casey, who's passed away. And you were talking about galactic cosmic rays. What's so interesting also is Robert Felix, he's passed away since. But these older gentlemen who had the true knowledge of how the workings of it and the galactic cosmic rays and the solar cycles really affected humanity itself. There's no other way to move forward. Like if you think you're going to work your job even through the next 1 to 2 years and everything's going to be fine, okay, you can get your salary and you're either going to have food or you're not. And see, everything we're talking about tonight, it boils down to, is there enough food for the society to move forward? Because during these changes, these galactic changes, solar system, local changes, there's just not enough food. And then if governments want to create false shortages through distribution disruptions on purpose, that would create even artificial shortages. You got to realize that humanity only revolves around the belly. That's it. More calories, things expand. Less calories, you lay there on the floor malnourished, and a bar of gold, a 5-pound bar of gold or whatever next to you means nothing, because you would rather trade a cup of rice for that 5-pound bar of gold because you won't starve to death that day. Food is the civilization. Without food, we have no civilization. I mean, if you're looking at just the most basic, rudimentary, if I'm an alien, I'm from a different star system, I'm coming from like Sagittarius A, and I broke through from the big black hole, and I'm coming out, I'm looking at Earth here, and I'm saying, wow, it's kind of an interesting civilization. They either have food and they have a civilization, or they don't have food and they don't have a civilization. It's really that black and white and A and B. Yeah. We have enough food or we don't have enough food. And every time we don't have enough food, civilization collapses. And we come back with some iteration of rewritten history of they did kind of went up this way and it's linear again. But it happens again and again and again and again. And the root cause is not enough food being grown. Or was it artificial shortages too at 6,000 years prior? You know, you go back to some of these, like Chaldeans, you go around the Black Sea area. And, you know, another whole thing about 6,000 years prior, there's an enormous amount of cities at 40-foot depth under the water across the entire, every coastline has civilization or some sort of city remnants at 40 foot. Because there was an entire civilization that developed 6,000 years ago that was at its apex as well. And then the ice melted a little more, and then the sea levels rose 40 feet. Like this whole thing about the global warming thing, we haven't seen not even feet of sea level rise in the last 20 plus years, even 40 years. They saw 40 feet that inundated their cities.
But that wasn't over 40, 50 years. That was most likely a very, very fast, quick event that happened.
Yeah, it was almost instantaneous where you're there and like, well, the water's coming up. It's coming up at this rate per day, a half an inch a day, a quarter inch a day, whatever. It's continuous. Like what onset that with the amount of energy coming into our planet to just continuously melt? I'm going to say it was a change in the jet streams of cloud cells. Same thing that onsets ice ages or, you know, brings us into these warmer periods, depending on the electromagnetics on it, where you look at where things are locked in and how the frequency, and if you're looking at toroid fields, how those are wrapping around and where the electrical flow goes or doesn't go. It either cools or heats. And if you have a continuous heating element going on top of a glacier because the toroid field's moving in a different direction because of a change on the sun itself with a different current flow into the star, that explains it.
You know, have you looked into magnetic tunneling at all and how there's various different scientific reports in the sense that the Earth is directly connected with the sun through what they call magnetic tunnels. And that these magnetic tunnels could potentially act as that methodology of communication for the Earth's magnetic field for when the sun has a massive solar X-flare. This is why we see the seismic or the volcanic activity on the planet that increases or decreases point aspects of our Earth's magnetic field. You know, I wonder if those play a specific role in that as well. I mean, if you have, well, let me ask you this. Does a magnetic shift, a magnetic pole shift, preposition all of this?
Would it not be the same on ley lines or some of these? You talk about volcanism. Okay. We understand that there's a direct correlation between solar activity and volcanic action or tectonic action with larger earthquakes on the planet, depending on how the planets are aligned and what we're doing. And if sunspot activity or solar coronal holes are coming in, we understand that. That's a settled science already. But what do we see at the sacred sites where you get interactions or crossings of ley lines? Is anybody measuring that as well? Because if you're talking about an emanation of, you know, volcanic lava coming out something, and you see the lightning and all that discharge pattern right there at that ground to sky lightning connection or that earth, you know, connection on the lines coming in, a lot of this is outbound discharge as well. Not a lot of people understand that. You know, if you're talking about the earth as a capacitor, if there's an overcharge in some regions, it's going to outbound flow. So if you're looking at volcanoes, why they're going up? That's an outbound flow. Mm-hmm. And it's connecting somewhere above the ionosphere coming back in. What about the ancient sacred sites that are always set upon ley lines that are crossings of 2, 3, 4 ley lines itself? That would be an inbound flow or a cellular current running through that. So when we're looking at these same things, like you're getting an X, you know, 8 point whatever flare coming in. Did anybody measure the electromagnetic differences at some of these sacred sites across the planet? Did we see any orbs or glowing plasma at these same places? Because obviously when they built that, they understood that there was something very special with the Earth at that point. Mm-hmm. Volcanic, tectonic, plasma, it's all interconnected. So is anybody measuring this, and who does have that information that has measured this coming in with huge events from the sun on these sacred sites? You can take it in 1,000 different directions, but it all leads back to the same thing. Your brain is affected by the same electromagnetic current flows that trigger volcanoes or earthquakes or particularly occurs at sacred sites or mineral deposits and veins that glow out of the earth, your brain's the same. It's a magnetic phenomenon as well. Do you perceive consciousness differently or the world around you right now? I would ask you. Are you seeing the world a little differently right now with the enhanced energies from our sun?
I absolutely have been.
Me too. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I absolutely have been. And it's been the last 4 years specifically have been just intense, crazy. It's funny too, because I learn faster, I learn more, and my consciousness is incredibly expanded. I've had a guest on my Fringe show, Laura Lee Skyfe, and she is a Jungian astrologer. So she does the astrology with mixing it in with Carl Jung's archetypes. And from this, we kind of developed various different theories. But, you know, at the heart of the matter, we are electromagnetic beings. Our neurological system is the foundation of who and what we are. Our neurological system is, in a sense, a incredibly large transducer. It transmits and receives signals in the electromagnetic spectrum. I've always looked at everything that we do, everything that is happening within our bodies is trillions upon trillions of neurons all firing in sequences and patterns over periods of time. And that they take on various different kind of circuit patterns, if you want to look at it like that. So when you have a thought pattern, that is trillions of neurons in your whole body firing in a certain pattern and sequence over that period of time. So what the ancients talked about in the sense of archetypes, the 12 different archetypes, 12 constellations, the 12 apostles, right? The 12 seasons. What we're starting to talk about here is that these are patterns of neurological expression or tuning patterns for your neurological system. So your neurological system can be attuned to a different pattern of expression. And this is widely influenced by all the subtle energy or etheric energy fields that are around you. Hence why the moon, the sun, and all the planetary bodies have a profound effect on the various expressions of the different archetypes. Depending on what your archetype is tuned to, which is just your neurological system is attuned to for when you were born at a specific point in time in a geographic place on this planet with the alignment of all the subtle energy fields around you, that tunes you to this archetype. And throughout your life, that is being implied upon by all the various transitions of that subtle energy and has various different effects. And that right now, that attunement is moving up to a new octave, that energy is increasing and tuning you to either a different set of archetypes or a different set of tuning standards for your electromagnetic system inside your body, or that it's moving it up to an octave, because that is the natural progression of how natural electrical systems actually operate.
Sidereal astrology, you're back into the Indian Vedas again. That gradual rising around the Yuga cycle is exactly what you described right there. That's the most perfect description of it. I want to take that and actually overlay the Yuga cycle on top of that. Please allow me to use that, because that's if you want to integrate those two together, that was the perfect explanation right there of what the Yuga cycle is encrypted about, is that rising and follies of the energies. And you know, when you said tune, if you look in the Mayans also, TUN, tune is the number for 20, but that was the calendar base of that. So we're talking about tuning on a calendar base, on frequency, on did we just take that and add an E to it and they use the same exact, that word is exactly the same, tune, T-U-N, or tune, T-U-N-E, same phonetically sounding. Are you just passing it down? You know, myth and legend is always passed down stories. Are we keeping the exact same, hidden knowledge encoded in something else? And it's a tune, it's a song now,
I think so. And I think that what's happening I've always explained it in the sense of a radio station, is that for the longest time, our planet was tuned to the sun, because the sun is the master tuner, and the sun is tuned by its position in the galaxy. The problem is that the sun moves very, very slowly through the galactic arm. So its transition of various different densities of energy or gases or charged particles is very, very slow moving and takes a gradual progression in order for it to change the dynamics of our sun. But our sun, it goes through these various different 11-year cycles, 120, 140-year cycles that can have a profound impact on the planet. And that if we looked at our planet as a radio station that was attuned to, let's say, 1035, then the majority of the consciousness on this planet will be a bell curve from 1035. You're going to have people at 99.5, 88.5, and they're just going to be completely fucking clueless to the world around them. But statistically, they have to exist. You're going to have some people that are sitting over here at 105.7 and 108, and they're going to seem like they're crazy, batshit people that are talking about consciousness and all this stuff. And the planet's sitting at 103.5, but then all of a sudden the planet gets a upburst in energy and it starts transitioning to that 105.3, and now you got a new bell curve model to where all those people at 105 or 10 or all those people at 103.5 are sitting there going, what the fuck just happened? And nothing makes sense. And the people at 105.3 are going, I told you so. You didn't want to fucking listen to me, right? And everybody else is just lost and mindless. And this is kind of what I see happening, is that there's this new energy, if you want to call it, or a new tuning standard that is coming into our planet, our sun, and this is affecting consciousness on a mass level, and I call it the awakening.
And then you look, Josh Reed, crystal ball reader. Like, how did you know that? Well, you were in, you know, the 4 steps in front of that. You saw already where it was going, where the hockey puck was going. You're already there, and everybody else is back on station 99.5, but you're already at 108. You're already vibrating in 108, understanding that where it is going to. And when the rest of the world catches up to you, Josh, this genius crystal ball, how did this guy know? That's exactly right. Where everybody's front running something. So the higher you're, I really believe this, the more you're in tune with nature. You got to be in tune with nature. You got to walk barefoot. You need to get out. You know how it is. You watch the animals. You watch the interactions. Like we have a bunch of ducks, and they, just watch the way they do. And we got chickens too, and they watch the way they. Like being in tune with that. Trying to get up with the sunrise. Trying to stay outside and actually watch the stars, where you can see things on the ecliptic and you understand like how things move around, and it's not flat like that. Once you get in tune with those nature patterns, then you can kind of find yourself and in tune with the electrical pattern within that. Mm. And why do you think so many people are like breaking through it and seeing this? What was conditioning of old no longer can hold state for this current time. This is why they really wanted to eliminate a lot of older people during these last 4 or 5 years, because they were the ones who most clearly saw it. With the frequency change, they saw it instantly, like, whoa, what just happened?
Yep.
The newer generations are still sort of in the vibratory, programming, for a better term. It'll hold state for them for a little while longer, but it's almost as if it drops off a cliff and it drops off. Like you watch a manufacturing line where, like a loaf of bread is going across and then it drops off the conveyor belt. It's like that's the layers of consciousness, and people are seeing through it, where the old one's not holding state anymore, and that's the thing that needs to be dropped off and eliminated, because there's still a few loaves behind there that can still hold state for a little while longer with this programming we've been given it. But think about the money for a second here. We're moving into a new frequency pattern for money too. Mm-hmm. So where's the money being milked from? Well, it's being milked from what we have grown up into, these Western five-eyed nations. Where's it moving to? Well, it's going to move over to where the precipitation patterns are moving to and changing. The West African monsoon is changing. It is dumping more rainfall across the Sahel and North Africa. And Gaddafi proved that you could tap primary water resources beneath the desert and pump that up and irrigate 100,000 acres and grow crops in the middle of what is bone dry desert by pulling primary water resources, which continually refill themselves. I mean, Gaddafi itself, like you look under Libya, the Nubian sandstone aquifer, they were looking at something like 4,100 cubic kilometers of water, primary water, that had just kind of settled from the Mediterranean Sea and had never been tapped even once. Started to pull that up, and what do we do? You know, Hillary went in there and bombed that. Well, they didn't bomb they bombed the cities, right? But they bombed every single canal that was bringing water from those primary water sources. So once you start to look at this, like let's go over into Ethiopia, for example, in Eritrea. The New Renaissance Dam, I would ask anybody to do research on the New Renaissance Dam. This was the largest hydroelectric project in Africa, in the driest place in Africa, that filled 5 years earlier than anticipated, with new spinning storms coming off of the Gulf, which you consider where Oman and Yemen are right now, in the Arabian Sea. Precipitation patterns are moving all across there, increasing above ground rainfall. They can pump now proven process from the ground, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands, if not even 100,000 cubic kilometers of water beneath Africa that has never been tapped once, primary water sources. It'll continue to refill. It's going to continue to refill from all sides. It'll continue to refill from the Mediterranean. It'll refill from the Atlantic. It'll, get filtered through the sandstone. That's the whole thing about Africa is just like one giant sandstone deposit. And as soon as you pump the water out, it just filters more water in. We come from the Indian Ocean, we come from the Atlantic Ocean, we go from the Mediterranean. It doesn't matter. How much you pull is how much is going to refill because of the sandstone nature of it. It's not granite, it's sandstone. That's the biggest thing.
And so you're saying that the wealth is, well, obviously the wealth is going to be partitioned around the places where you can grow food.
You can get a double rotation crop out of the Sahel and the Middle East if you can combine those forces like the BRICS are. It's double the size of the United States and Canada combined.
Wow.
Double rotation crop. So think about who controls food. So if we're coming into this grand solar minimum or solar changes where the electromagnetics of our planet's going to change, then cloud cells and the jet streams are going to change, and the plant by date and the harvest by dates are no longer valid because things are flooding during the middle of what would be the maturation phase, or even flooding. A few years ago, it was so much rain at harvest time that the actual grains inside the heads of wheat, for example, started to sprout out. So they started to grow the heads off the heads of the wheat itself. Areas are going to have to change. We're going to have to shift the crop growing zones. So those that have the most stable crop growing zones, and why is Ukraine such a valued proposition or a valued property on the planet? It's a breadbasket of Europe. Kazakhstan's another one. Myanmar is another. Like, these are the three areas I'd mapped out a few years back that could increase crop production. Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Myanmar. And then the whole Middle East and North Africa, Sahel region could give double production of what all of Canada and America combined could do. But remember, the soils have never been tilled and really at mega farmed even once used. So if you're coming into virgin soils with the understanding of the green technologies of how to push fertilizer into that with GMO crops, I'm not a fan at all. I'm just saying, I'm just for a mind experiment here. They could push more crop out of there than any place in history ever. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So reset the debt system. Where are you going to take this non-functional debt system that has run its course through the Five Eyes nations? Where are you going to reset the debt? You need to start the BRICS system again. You started over in Africa and the Sahel, and you get them to take on loans. And then you can start the entire global debt system again on the 80-year fourth turning in Africa and the Sahel. I'm going to make a bold prediction. Josh's going to make a bold prediction here. In 80 years from now, you will not know the difference between sub-Saharan Africa and an American neighborhood. That's what I'm talking about, the turning of the debt system. They're going to become so wealthy. They're going to have so much food.
Now,
And so much extra time and abundance that when we look in Africa and Chad, we'll have the same equivalent lifestyle as America in 80 years. Bold prediction, but I stand by it.
No, and I agree with you, and I think that you're spot on. And this is exactly the main reason why we see the proxy wars that are occurring in Northern Africa, why the Western systems are being pushed out by various funded rebel groups from Russia and China, how they are utilizing this aspect of the United States wants to go in there and the West wants to go in there, and they want to utilize this old guard methodology to overthrow leaders, to corrupt them, to go in there and coup their governments, steal their elections, and coerce and force the people to do something, to where the BRICS nations over the last 5 years have made really good relationships with all of these Northern African, Central American, South American countries. And one of the things that they did is they treated them differently. Instead of forcing and coercing them, they said, hey, we're going to invest in your infrastructure. We're going to invest in your agriculture. And they're helping them build that up. And they liked it so much that they started pushing the West out. And the West started waging proxy wars with obviously China and Russia through these various different countries and through rising up of rebel groups. And this is what we're seeing all throughout Northern Africa right now. And it's interesting to have this part of the context come in there, because one of the things I've also said is that the BRICS nations, they're investing heavily in the agriculture of a lot of these third world countries to rise them up to first world nations, because number one is it replaces the GDP that the United States provides, United States and Canada provides from the Western world into the rest of the world. And if you can replace that mechanism, well, now you have the control for the next 80 years, just like you were saying. On a side note, 80 years fourth turning, 72 years is 1 degree of the precessional cycle. And I've always looked at that as very, very significant in the sense how the fourth turning always happens approximately 70 to 80 years, which 72 years is 1 degree movement within the galactic arm on that precessional cycle.
Yeah, and then 5 of those 80-year cycles is also a grand solar minimum cycle. So you start to get into these heavier, more powerful cycles intertwined with smaller cycles. 11.8-year solar cycle mixed in with, but we could talk about de Vries cycles or Bray cycles at 3,000 years. There's a huge amount of cycles that are intertwined in between. We've got Ice Age cycles, galactic year, for example, the galactic cross, 12,500 years. I mean, there's a huge amount of cycles within cycles. So where do we exist right now? But I could definitively say one thing, though.
Yeah.
It costs money to run a military. And at the disintegration of non-wantage of dollars, and as fast as these countries are, kicking away our bonds and usage of US dollars. And Saudi Arabia just on the 9th, what's today, the 11th? On the 9th, they said that they will no longer accept 100% payment in US dollars, that they'll take anything for payment. They'll take gold. They'll take euro. So Saudi Arabia is joining BRICS, and they're also not going to use dollar-denominated purchases anymore. So the petrodollar, as we understand it from this time, is dead on arrival after the 10th and 11th of this month. So where does that take us? Like, you have to realize the only reason we're able to hold any kind of position over the world is because we have this military out there that's in all these countries, bombing just indefinitely. And when this stops, and you could take a huge history lesson from the British, the sun never set on their empire until it didn't. And what's going to happen with ours when we can't pay the military to run its missions? We can't pay the arms manufacturers to produce any longer. We can't even get the base materials. We can't get the copper for the rounds for the shells or the rounds. At what point does it stop? It's really going to stop. Please understand that a huge amount of countries are divesting. 53 billion from China. And then you look at, was Denmark kicked off a bunch? Oh, so I'm sorry, Belgium. It kicked off like 12 billion. And you start to look at 50, 50 million here, a billion there, a couple billion there, 50 billion. And you start to look at this amount, this massive amount, and it turns into, $500 billion of just kicked off debt this year alone. How many, and you roll it down another, 6 months from now, another couple of trillion gone, and like everything in settlement, cross payment settlements, not going to be settled in dollars. At what point do the world say, all right, we don't need your bonds anymore? We don't need your American debt anymore. We're going to cross settle out using anything else except for the dollar. By the way, you bombed us 6 times. You changed our governments. You put in these puppets, and we no longer want to use your dollar. But it costs money to run a military. And without that military, we have no supplies. We have no raw materials. We have no twisting of the arm to give us preferential treatment. And as it implodes inside here, I don't know, maybe you could tell me what you think, how the implosion might work moving forward, or what's your vision of it? I'm curious. I really like to ask questions. So we all understand it's kind of at the end of the empire here. So your, I guess, final thought, like wrapping it up and like, how does it transition from here downward? And it's not going to be upward. Anybody out there, you're living in a fantasy world if you think this is going to somehow turn the ship around and right it in its course again. We are going this direction. Unfortunately, we are. I had to face that reality myself, being an American over here, a citizen, having an American passport. Like, this is something we've never even, envisioned in our lifetime. It's never been sold to us as even a possibility ever growing up here in this country. So what happens? Where does it go from here?
So I think that what's happening here is we obviously have November and then we have January, 2 very important months in the next 12 months. November is going to come. I don't know what they're going to play out in the meantime. Global economic collapse, summer of love with riots all throughout the United States. It's going to bring in, the illegal immigrant riots or terrorist attacks. If there's going to be an election, if there's not going to be an election, if there is an election, are they going to transition power? My guess, probably not. That's where January plays a very, very important role. But I think the result of no matter what happens in the next 6 months is that we move into a 10th Amendment civil war to where the states are rising up against the federal government, very similar to what we just saw with 19 states supporting Texas and the border and closing it down. The Supreme Court case win for Texas against the federal government. And then just recently, 24 red states coming together against Joe Biden for the executive order on the nationalization of the National Guard, to where he wanted to take the power away from the governors in the sense of the deployments of the National Guard. And so I think that after January, and around that time, January 6th timeframe, because I believe that if they allow the election to happen, Trump does take it, they're going to formulate a whole projection of what was happening January 6, 2020 in 2024, to where the Democrats are going to push the elections back to the states, and they'll do it through process, through stealing the House, and they'll have the new Congress on January 3rd. But my thought is they'll utilize the 10th Amendment. States will stand up and say, we do not recognize federal authority. They'll begin the process of taking over military installations in red states and seizing the assets of the federal government in those states, not recognizing federal authority. And this will delve into a legal battle, civil war. Supreme Court will play a crucial role into that. I don't think it's going to be kinetic in any way, shape, or form. It could evolve to be kinetic, but I think what you have is a formation of a new country dynamic from all of that, probably with about 24 states, maybe more.
Mind fuck America. It's not going to be kinetic. It's going to be about controlling your mind. So Green Day, man, had that crystal ball as well, They're going to try to control your mind versus control your action. But again, one is the other. So yeah, thanks for the last thoughts there. I need to try to wrap my mind around the conversation too, because this involves all of us. And for everybody out there listening, as these changes occur, your food prices are going to continue to skyrocket. The availability of your food supply in supermarkets and the guaranteed delivery of that distribution chain is not guaranteed. So please get ready. Start growing your gardens. Start raising some animals. Don't care what it is. Could, fowl. It could be anything. Rabbits. Could be guinea pigs. Could be banty roosters or bantams, or it could be regular chickens, geese, ducks. Don't care what it is. You need to raise something. You got to eat. and learn wild foraging too. Learn from our old ways.
Right. And a
Typically, we
good
want to go
idea.
back 150 years or 100 years, and then just go back and learn what they did, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and let's close it out with that there, David. Things that people need to do. So I'm planting nut trees and fruit trees.
You got hazelnuts?
Hazelnuts, yep, hazelnuts, nut trees. The reason is it's a good source of protein, and one tree, you can get one hell of a lot of a harvest. Got chickens, got goats coming probably end of the summer. Trying to getting the garden beds up. Got trying to plant. And when you plant your garden beds, people, think about how many people are in your household and try to plan accordingly in the sense of how much you can harvest off of each one of these plants per the people in your house, and also know how to store and preserve that food for the fall and harvest time frame. But David, please go ahead and then tell some people some suggestions. I just want to let everybody know, though, is I did just post his links in the chat, the live chats, but they're also in the description. You guys can find his YouTube page and go subscribe over there. Adapt 2030, ADAPT 2030. You can also search for that in YouTube and find that. And you can also go on over to his website, oilseedcrops.org. I want to go ahead and say that for the audio podcast listeners, oilseedcrops.org. But go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks. We're rebranding right now, my team and myself, because YouTube's run its course and the algorithm has pushed us to, well, relegated to the dustbin of history. So we're going to rebrand ourselves. Like you've encountered the same exact thing. So
shit,
we're just trying to share. That's the craziest thing. All we want to do is share information on how to make your lives better and how to get through some of these changes. And how can we be like, how can an algorithm push that down? Because I want to share with you, please. My number one thing, we try to work with acorns for the last couple of years. There's a huge amount of acorns everywhere. If you can learn how to soak them longer and process acorns, you got a viable source that everybody will walk by. They'll leave those. 99.9999% of the people will leave that food on the floor. And you can walk in there and then have, some sort of food. And again, wild foraging, you got the ferns, you got the mushrooms, you got what can you learn from others? And again, you can't just like walk out and pick a mushroom and go, oh, it's good. It's a red one with white dots on it. Let me eat that one. No, you can't. You really have to learn from experts. So invest in yourself. And you go, well, to bring an expert by my place, if I have a private person come by, it's going to cost me, $200 for the day for them to come by and show me everything in my forest or on my land that I can eat. Get a couple people with you and go down as a group and everybody throw in $50. That's the best $50 you'll ever pay in your entire life.
Smart.
So don't shortchange yourself on the knowledge you learn about what the foods are available or about the foods that you can prepare. Take a bread making course. Spend the money to do it. Because these things in the end, like, preparing your own breads, it costs cents per loaf, cents versus $6, $8, $10, depending on where you are on the planet or in the United States. There's so many simple things we can do to get ready for the change. But, again, raising animals, but you're going to have to protect them. And again, this is the thing I really can't reiterate enough. Like, you're going to have to make that split-second decision that is going to change your life for the rest of your life when you make that choice of they take your animals or they don't take your animals. Somebody's going to come by and like pilfer that in the middle of the night and harm you. You're going to have to make choices you never, ever thought you would have to make in your entire life. Just like I said, the school system and our entire, media system has never told you there's a possibility of collapse in America, ever.
Right.
So these same things, you're going to have to make that split-second choice. Are you going to protect that? Or are you going to be, taken out during that time? So, I'm trying to go around the rhythm here, just to keep us all.
If you allow them to take one, they'll come back for more.
Yeah. And if it's an agency coming in, if this whole bird flu thing's going through, we need to take all of your 20 birds. You're taking my entire protein source and my meat source. I don't think so, bro.
Yep.
You're going to have to make a choice right then and right there that will stay with you for the rest of your life. Now, it could be the starting gun for something else, but once that happens, then I'm sure a few of your neighbors are going to back you up, and the rest of those people coming for the next time aren't going to be coming there. So you have to realize that this is whole ebb and flow of, again, spiritual consciousness and Are you ready to dive into karma to connect yourself with something else like that? Or are you willing to protect your families and your community? It gets much deeper than just like, it's my damn egg. It's my chicken. It's my food source. It's my spiritual body and my connection to the creator itself. Like, where do we all sit in this duality of everything happening at this time? It's far deeper. I mean, we're all here for this purpose at this time. Like, how do we all deal with this? And are you ready to make a choice that will stay with you? That's more the question.
Yeah.
Can you make that choice? And can you visualize it in your mind that you've already made the choice, so when it happens, you make it without hesitation?
Well, and that's the plight, man. That's the plight, because, you know, on one hand, you want to preserve life at all costs. And on the other hand, you have to preserve your life at all costs. And if you give a little, they will take a lot. And you have to make a stand. You have to stand your ground, but you also have to have the ability to do that. You have to have the knowledge, the know-how. You have to be well prepared. And that's why, you know, I urge people to go listen to your podcast, to go visit your channels, and why people listen to this one as well is because of the information. Like you said, we're just here to share information, get information out to help prepare people for what is coming. And I hope that people go out there, they visit your website, oilseedcrops.org, as well as go on over to your YouTube channel, guys. You can find that at Adapt 2030. You can find that just by searching Adapt 2030, or you can go to the link that's in the description. David, my friend, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Going to have you back on again. I'm going to hit you up. We're going to get this scheduled. Much love, respect. God bless everybody. Take care. Have a good night.
Spoon, that's impossible. Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.